It was a perfect summer day in Texas. The sun was blazing, the cicadas were singing, and my pool, my pride and joy, glistened invitingly in the backyard. I had built it with my own 2 hands, pouring blood, sweat, and a not insignificant amount of cash into making it the oasis it was today. It was my retreat, a sanctuary for family and close friends. Then came Karen. Karen was the self-proclaimed enforcer of the HOA, though she took her title far beyond the actual bylaws. If there was a rule, Karen either bent it to her will or invented one on the spot. She was the reason I had opted out of HOA membership when I bought the house. I wasn't about to pay someone to micromanage me, and legally my property wasn't even under their jurisdiction. But Karen didn't care about legalities. It started when she showed up at my doorstep one afternoon, her blonde bob perfectly coiffed and her clipboard in hand. "Hello," she said in a tone that dripped with fake sweetness. "I noticed you have a lovely pool in your backyard." "Thanks," I replied, leaning against the doorframe. "Built it myself." "Well," she continued, flashing a tight smile, "I wanted to remind you that as part of the HOA community, you're required to allow access to common amenities." I raised an eyebrow. "This pool isn't a common amenity. It's private property." Her smile faltered. "The HOA guidelines state." "I'm not part of the HOA," I interrupted. "And this pool is not under your control." Karen's expression hardened. "That's not very neighborly of you." "Maybe not," I said, crossing my arms, "but it's within my rights." She left in a huff, and I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next weekend, I caught a group of teenagers climbing over my fence. When I confronted them, they claimed Karen had told them the pool was open to the neighborhood. I sent them packing and immediately installed security cameras. Days later, Karen showed up again. "This pool is becoming a nuisance," she declared. "People in the community are complaining that you're hoarding resources." "Resources?" I asked incredulously. "It's my pool. I pay for the water, the upkeep, everything." "You're out of line." Karen's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." That night, I went through the security footage and saw what I'd suspected. Karen had been encouraging people to climb the fence, treating my private pool as if it were the HOA's property. It wasn't just teenagers either. Adults with lawn chairs and coolers had tried to sneak in. I called her the next morning. "Karen, I have security footage of you telling people to use my pool," I said, keeping my tone calm. "You're bluffing," she said with a scoff. "No bluff," I replied. "And if it happens again, I'll be filing trespassing charges." Her response was icy. "You're making a big mistake." I thought that would scare her off. Instead, Karen doubled down. A few days later, I woke up to find a police car in front of my house. The officer approached, and Karen was standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed, watching smugly. "Morning," the officer said, tipping his hat. "We got a call about an unauthorized pool operating in the neighborhood." "Unauthorized?" I repeated, suppressing a laugh. "It's my pool on my property." Karen stepped forward. "He's not complying with HOA rules, and the neighborhood is suffering because of it." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Is this true? Are you part of the HOA?" "Nope," I said, pulling out the paperwork I'd been carrying in anticipation of this nonsense. "I'm not a member, and my property is legally exempt from their jurisdiction." The officer skimmed the papers, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, it looks like he's within his rights." Karen's face turned an impressive shade of red. "But the HOA doesn't have authority here," the officer interrupted. "If you call us again for a non-issue, it could be considered harassment." Karen stomped away, muttering something about not being done yet. As I watched her retreat, I knew she was plotting her next move. Karen wasn't one to back down, but neither was I. She had no idea what I had in store for her. ChatGPT said. The next morning I got to work. Karen thought she could bully me into submission, but I wasn't about to roll over. If she wanted a fight, I'd give her one, and I'd make sure it was perfectly legal, airtight, and impossible for her to wriggle out of. Step 1 was securing the perimeter. If Karen wanted to play games, she wasn't going to win by sending trespassers into my backyard again. I reinforced the fence around the pool, installing a taller, more robust structure with a key code gate. I also upgraded my security cameras, adding motion sensors and a system that would alert me directly if anyone came near the pool. Step 2 was collecting evidence. I reviewed the footage from the last few weeks, cataloging every instance of trespassing Karen had orchestrated. I also printed out copies of the messages she'd sent to neighbors on the HOA app, where she'd falsely claimed the pool was a community amenity. Finally, step 3, legal preparation. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in property rights and HOA disputes. When I laid out my situation, he laughed. "Sounds like you've got a Karen on your hands," he said, shaking his head. "That's putting it lightly," I replied. After reviewing my evidence, he assured me I had a rock-solid case. Not only was Karen guilty of harassment, but she was also liable for the damages caused by the trespassers she encouraged. Armed with my evidence, I sent Karen a formal cease and desist letter through my lawyer. The letter outlined her violations and warned that further interference would result in legal action. I knew Karen wouldn't take it well, and sure enough, she retaliated. The very next day, a new HOA notice appeared on my door. This one accused me of violating noise ordinances and creating a public disturbance with the pool. I couldn't help but laugh. My pool was silent, save for the soft hum of the filter. Karen was grasping at straws, and it showed. Rather than confront her directly, I decided to play the long game. Karen wanted to paint me as the villain, but I'd let her dig her own grave. I sent a copy of the notice to my lawyer, who advised me to document everything but otherwise stay quiet. Meanwhile, I got to work setting up the final piece of my plan. If Karen wanted a spectacle, I'd give her one she'd never forget. The weekend rolled around, and Karen decided to escalate again. That Saturday, I caught her and a group of neighbors standing just outside my fence, pointing and whispering. She had a clipboard in hand and was gesturing wildly, likely spinning some tale about how my pool was a menace to society. I didn't confront her. I simply turned up the speakers connected to my outdoor cameras and said, "Smile for the cameras, Karen. You're live." Her face twisted in shock as she realized I'd been watching the entire time. She stormed off, dragging the neighbors with her, but not before yelling, "You'll regret this." Little did she know regret was heading her way. That night, I finalized the details of my plan. It was time to take Karen's meddling to the next level, on my terms. By the time she realized what I was doing, it would be too late for her to do anything about it. The morning sun was barely peeking over the horizon when I got to work on the final phase of my plan. Karen had pushed every boundary imaginable, and now it was time to push back, with style. First, I made a few calls to some local businesses. My plan involved turning my private oasis into something even Karen couldn't have dreamed of controlling. By noon, a team of workers arrived at my property, their trucks loaded with equipment. Karen, of course, didn't miss a thing. I spotted her peeking through her blinds as the workers unloaded a sound system, decorative lighting, and a large banner that read, "Private Pool, Community Appreciation Day." The workers set up the sound system and strung lights along the fence, turning the backyard into a festive retreat. A catering truck arrived shortly after, delivering an array of snacks and drinks. It wasn't a neighborhood pool party. This was a private event I'd organized with carefully vetted guests, including families from outside the HOA and local charities. By mid-afternoon, the yard was buzzing with activity. Children laughed as they splashed in the pool, parents lounged under umbrellas with cool drinks, and a live acoustic musician played soft tunes near the patio. Everyone had signed waivers agreeing to the private nature of the event, ensuring everything was legal and above board. It wasn't long before Karen made her move. Her SUV screeched to a halt in front of my house, and she marched up to the gate with her clipboard in hand. She stood there, glaring at the private event sign before shouting over the gate. "What's going on here?" she demanded. I strolled over, holding a glass of lemonade and wearing my best grin. "Oh, Karen. I didn't see you there. It's a private event, by invitation only." "This is a violation of the HOA's rules," she snapped, her face turning red. "Actually," I said, pulling out a laminated copy of my deed, "this property is not under the HOA's jurisdiction. Everything here is perfectly legal." Karen's jaw clenched. "You're disrupting the neighborhood." "Disrupting?" I echoed, gesturing to the cheerful, orderly scene behind me. "Looks pretty peaceful to me. And just so you know, I've kept the noise below the legal decibel limit." Karen looked ready to explode. "You can't get away with this." "I already have," I said, smirking. As if on cue, a local news crew I'd invited arrived, cameras rolling. The event was part of a charity fundraiser I'd organized, benefiting a local children's hospital. The crew set up just outside the gate, interviewing me and some of the guests about the event. Karen froze as the cameras turned in her direction. She quickly turned and marched back to her SUV, driving off in a huff. The rest of the day went off without a hitch. Families enjoyed the pool, the fundraiser collected a generous amount for the hospital, and everyone left with smiles on their faces. As the sun set, the lights cast a warm glow over the yard, and the pool sparkled like a jewel. Karen, I knew, was stewing in her house, plotting her next move. But I wasn't worried. With the charity event covered in the local news and my legal bases covered, I'd effectively checkmated her. Tomorrow the real fireworks would begin, and Karen had no idea what was coming. You said. The aftermath of my charity event was immediate and spectacular. The local news segment aired that night, featuring footage of smiling families enjoying my backyard oasis, all while raising money for a great cause. The reporter ended with a glowing statement about neighborly generosity and how private citizens can make a difference. Karen, on the other hand, was nowhere to be seen. But I knew she was watching. The next morning I got confirmation of her brewing storm when I received another HOA notice taped to my door. This one wasn't even subtle. It accused me of holding unauthorized commercial activities on my property and threatened fines. It was laughable, considering I wasn't a member of the HOA, and they had no legal standing over my land. I decided it was time for the final act. First, I filed a formal complaint with the county about Karen's harassment. My lawyer submitted all the evidence I'd collected, including the security footage of her encouraging trespassing, the bogus notices, and even her attempts to intimidate me. The county official I spoke to was particularly interested in the footage of Karen trespassing on my property herself, clipboard in hand. Then I tipped off the local news. I had built a good rapport with the reporter from the charity event, and they were eager to dig deeper into the HOA overreach angle. A week later the story aired, featuring interviews with me and other neighbors who'd been targeted by Karen's antics. She fined me for planting flowers that weren't on the approved list, one neighbor said. She threatened to sue me for parking my truck in my own driveway, another added. The piece painted Karen as a power-hungry bully, and by the time it ended, she was the talk of the town, and not in a good way. But the real hammer came down at the next HOA meeting. The county official I'd filed the complaint with attended, as did most of the neighborhood. Karen sat at the front, looking smug as always, until the official began reading the list of violations she'd committed. Encouraging trespassing, harassment, abuse of position and willful misrepresentation of HOA policies, the official stated, looking directly at Karen. These are serious offenses. Karen tried to protest, but her voice was drowned out by the murmurs of agreement from the crowd. Mrs. Jenkins, one of the more reasonable HOA board members, stood up and announced that Karen was being removed as president effective immediately. Karen's face turned a deep shade of crimson. You can't do this to me. You've done it to yourself, Mrs. Jenkins replied coolly. Karen stormed out of the meeting, leaving her clipboard behind. In the weeks that followed, Karen's house went up for sale, and she moved out of the neighborhood. The new HOA leadership made it a point to apologize for her actions, and relations between the HOA and non-members improved dramatically. As for me, I celebrated the victory with another pool party, this time for the entire neighborhood. Hercules the inflatable bull, a nod to another infamous Karen story I'd heard about, floated proudly in the pool as kids played and adults laughed over grilled burgers and lemonade. Karen had tried to turn my private sanctuary into a battleground, but all she'd done was bring the community closer together. The pool sparkled under the evening lights as I leaned back, sipping a cold drink and watching the joy around me. The battle was over and I had won, not just for myself but for everyone who'd ever been pushed around by someone like Karen. Justice, as it turned out, was best served poolside.